Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, it's Friday. It's Graham Coath with My Music, and today I'm speaking to Keeley, but you have to wait because first there's this. I need to get going, Mel. See you later. Keeley, thank you so much for joining me. And apparently you've been a bit of a brave warrior today.
That's the most judicious and well-timed use of the EP title. Yes, I come to you straight from, well, not quite A&E, but straight from the how do I say, the kind of surgical wing of St. Michael's Hospital in Dunleary, Dublin.
Is it looking okay? Not you. The hospital, is that okay? I mean, is it standing up?
Yeah, the hospital. It was quite chill there today, which was nice. Perhaps because it's actually a relatively nice day here. A relatively nice day in summer in Ireland is not a foregone conclusion. But what
quite rare.
Yeah. It's sadly rare. We are beset by very winter-esque summers, very winter-esque winters, winter-esque springs, and winter-esque autumns. So we live in a state of almost perpetual winter, which is quite disappointing, but what can we do?
It's why Guinness was invented, and Irish whiskey, basically.
I don't drink either, so I'm kind of up a gum tree without a Guinness or a whiskey.
Oh, are you teetotal? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm teetotal, and I'm how do I say, kind of afloat upon the the sort of Puritan path.
That's an interesting one. What does someone that's Irish who doesn't drink? Because it's not like you have, it's not like you're well known for Irish coffee. Basically, is coffee with a whiskey in it, and it's not like you're really known for a tea. So what does like Yorkshire, for example? So what do Irish people that don't drink alcohol drink?
Good question. Well, the thing is, anybody who knows, ever since I've been a baby, if I'm drinking something that I really enjoy, I have a habit of closing my eyes and just savoring the taste of what I'm drinking. So I would get a really lovely kind of sense of kind of relish when I drink like fruit juice or strawberry milk. I love strawberry milk. So they'd be kind of my favorite drinks, like strawberry milk. The way to my heart is a sizable tankard of strawberry milk or chocolate milk. I love chocolate milk as well, or banana milk. I'm not picky. So yeah, those would be my favorite drinks, but I don't have them very often.
That would be your preferred rider at a gig. Would be an array of different milkshakes. Then really.
That's a good point. The thing is, it's it's kind of one of the frustrating things, because we do have a very, very alcohol-centric culture in Ireland, and that is the way it is, and I know that is the case in kind of some other in the home countries as well. But I think whenever I have been in a pub, there have been times when I've just really, I could murder a strawberry milk, and even though I know that the bar man or bar woman, the bartender, doesn't have it, I have this thing where sometimes I ask for it anyway, in the hope that eventually I ask them enough times that they start to stock this, because when you don't drink alcohol, it's quite tricky in a pub scenario, because drinking water, although that's the best thing for my weight, water it can be a little bit, it's just,
Boring.
it can be a little bit, yeah, it can be a little bit boring. And then, I try and avoid fizzy drinks because, of the impact that they would have on my waistline and my teeth or whatever. So you're just left with a very, very limited palette of drinks. Well, actually, nothing really, because it's frustrating. Like there've been very much times when I've kind of gone through the list. It's a bit like being a vegetarian. I'm a vegetarian, a pescatarian, and the vegetarian option in a restaurant is generally one thing, and you either eat it or you're going to go hungry. But there was a place in Dublin actually where I went for lunch with my friends recently, and there were 12 items on the menu. 11 of them had meat in it. One item had fish in it, which I could eat, and there was no vegetarian options. And I mean, this is the year 2021. Like, it's so many people are vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, but we still live in a very primitive world, I believe. So yeah, it is frustrating, that there isn't the access to choice that there ought to be.
Oh, I agree with you, and actually, as a meat eater, I agree with you as well, because I quite like vegetarian food, and sometimes when I go to a restaurant, I actually quite like to choose a vegetarian dish for no other reason than I eat meat all the time. Actually, when I go out for a special occasion, I quite like to not eat meat, if that makes sense. And
what you mean.
And then if you're faced with, I think we have gone beyond the sort of nut roast. that we have managed to sort of move on, and evolve slightly from that, but it's not much better. As you say, one or two items on the menu that are vegetarian and seem to be sort of almost quite often pre-packaged as well.
Yes. It's frustrating.
Yeah, I honestly think we need more vegetarian restaurants, and that's coming, as I say, from a meat eater point of view. I used to go to a festival every year in Cheltenham, and the best food cart at that festival was the vegetarian food cart, without a shadow of a doubt. It was absolute. I mean, the variety of food that they produced, which was all kind of street food, but the variety of food that they produced and the flavors in it were amazing. So let's just have a bit more of that, shall we? Let's just let's see a few for everybody. Let's just see some more vegetarian food choices out there. I totally get it.
There ought to be. There's actually the best restaurant in Dublin. My favorite restaurant in Dublin is a place called Cornucopia. And if you ever have you been to Dublin, or have you been to Cornucopia?
I can't say I've been. Well, I wouldn't remember if I've been to Cornucopia. I have been to Dublin, and I had quite a lot of Guinness. So I can't remember whether I've been to Cornucopia or not. But it was very nice.
Well, Cornucopia is a really lovely place. It's the food is amazing. They rotate their menus constantly, and it's all entirely fresh produce, like it's homemade, as in it's baked and made entirely from scratch on the premises, and it's it's a really vibey place. I mean, just because of the pandemic, it's unfortunately had to remain closed for about the past 15 months. But it is a really, if you get a chance next time you come to Dublin, check out Cornucopia, because even as a meat eater, I think it'll blow your mind. It's the tastiest place, and there's so many meat-esque kind of options that don't have meat in them, but that would kind of really satiate the appetite of a meat eater, I think.
Well, that's what I like. And the other thing that really annoys me about food, I'm sorry, by the way, folks, that we haven't got onto music yet. We will do. Don't worry, we will get onto music. But it is nearly 20 past 4 on a Friday afternoon. Food is at the forefront of our minds, right? And I'm sure actually this is just whetting the appetites for everyone sitting at home thinking, oh, I can't wait for food tonight now. But the other thing that annoys me is, and I was just talking to my sons about this the other day, was the amount of food products for vegan or vegetarians that try to look like meat. Why? I don't get that, because surely if you've got something else, make it look like whatever else it's meant to be. Really, I mean, I like food when it's vegetarian. I like lots of pulses and beans and rice and whatever. I like it to look like vegetables. I don't need it to look like a burger, because a burger's a burger, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You just reminded me of that immortal scene in Spinal Tap when Nigel Tufnell is grappling with the bread backstage. You know the scene, and he's got his manager Ian Faith on hand, trying to deal with this catastrophe that's unfolding. And he's adamant that he's a professional and he'll rise above it. And the manager is being very very considerate and trying to ease him through this very stressful episode where he basically wants bigger bread, and he's trying to fold the bread around the ham. But you've just reminded me of that, very Tufnell-esque.
Well, it is. No, absolutely. Yeah, my favorite bit about that whole movie is the fact that they can't find the stage. I just find that bit going round and round trying to find the stage is just perfect. We've all been there. We have all been there. Yeah, I never got stuck in a pod on stage. Fortunately, I wasn't silly enough to ever climb into a pod on stage, because you know that's going to go wrong. May have got stuck in a toilet trying to get to the stage, but never a pod. So tell me,
that happened to Oasis. By the way, during the Be Here Now tour, they had. They came out of the phone box, or they came out of an enormous structure on their very elaborate stage set. On the very first night of the tour, I think it might have been in Oslo or somewhere in Scandinavia, and they realized that they hadn't assigned the task of opening the door, and it could only be opened from the outside. So they were stuck inside this quite small space, the 5 members of Oasis, for quite a few minutes. And Liam, and Noel Gallagher tells the story, Liam was quite unnerved because he didn't like he didn't like contained spaces, or having his freedom kind of cramped by. And so they ended up getting this guy who I think was the stagehand to kind of come and open the door, and he gradually became more and more part of the stage set. You'll see him in, I think, the Manchester GMX gig, where he actually wears a top hat and tails, and it gets really elaborate by the end, and he's kind of going on to open the door for Oasis on stage in like a tuxedo and everything, like a bellboy costume and stuff. It's brilliant. Anyway, sorry for that momentary musical memory.
No, it's fine. And do you know what? If you ever get any of these little memories muddled up, or you don't quite get the detail right, it's fine, because when people that are like really music fans watch these things, they correct you. I've always found that if I get a date slightly wrong by a year or whatever, suddenly someone will know. They go, no, actually it was 79. It wasn't 78, it's 79. So we'll find out if it wasn't quite technically correct. But yeah, it's great. People love those little nuancy facts about things. I think a similar thing happened to U2 on the Pop Mart tour. They got stuck inside the lemon. Which is a dreadful thing, to get stuck inside a lemon. But that's the whole thing that makes films like Spinal Tap and Bad News that followed it really, really funny, which is actually there's an element of truth in it. Absolute element of truth. So yeah, absolutely. Do you remember Bad News as well? Do you remember Bad News that followed on?
I don't know of Bad News. I've never heard of it.
Oh, Bad News is brilliant. Bad News was the comic strip. There was a group of people called the comic strip, which Ade Edmondson was one of them, and so was Rick Mail, and Jennifer Saunders was in it as well. And probably the best scene from the Bad News film was Jennifer Saunders playing a journalist, goes to see Rick Mail, who's the lead singer of Bad News. It's a heavy metal band, down in his underground basement, and he plays her this new song that has been given to him by John Lennon, and he says it's called Imogene, It's about a it's about a girl called Imogene, and he just starts up and he goes, "Da da 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 da, Imogene, all the people." And she goes, "That's Imagine." He goes, "No, it's not. It's Imogen." Brilliant. So,
Speaking of scenes from movies, I've just suddenly realised I probably look like there's that wonderful scene in Wayne's World when Rob Lowe's character starts lecturing Wayne about the importance of pleasing the kind of corporate figurehead at the helm of this TV company that Wayne and Garth have kind of gotten in cahoots with. And he says, like it's your choice, and he's kind of putting the squeeze on them, quite in a heavy-handed way. And they go into this hilarious skit about commercialism and product placement. And I just suddenly realized that it probably looks like I'm in that scene in Wayne's World where Wayne and Garth are going to say, I will not bet any sponsor, and they're bedecked in what do you call it, Reebok kind of threads, and they're holding a Pizza Hut. Like I just happen to be wearing a Redford t-shirt. This is not a case of product placement. This was given to me for my birthday the other day, and I just threw it on before I dashed out the door to go to the hospital to have my ears seen to. So yeah, just wanted to kind of.
I was going to ask you what is the injury? Can we ask what the injury is?
Yeah, well, what it is, it's a thing called a keloid scar, which.
Right.
A keloid scar. Yeah, I had never heard of it until my GP said that's a keloid scar. You should get that seen to. What happened was I had a kind of an allergic reaction to having my ears. I had an allergic. One side of my head had an allergic reaction to having my ear pierced. The other one was fine with it. Maybe because I'm a Gemini and I'm kind of we're quite a duopoly. We're all yeah. Exactly. So it's scar that one side of my head was like, this is fine, and the other one was like, I'm not having it. So it just developed into this kind of just this problem. And eventually I just thought, okay, I have to get this sorted. And I was on my way to a rehearsal the other day, and I got this letter, and my life is so frantic and frenetic these days that I just read my post when I'm on my way to rehearsals, and I opened it and it said, "You have a medical appointment this Friday." And I was like, wait, it's 2 days time. So I was like, okay, I just have to roll with it, go to races, and had to kind of get it sorted. But they just kind of had to inject like steroids and stuff into my ear. But it just So that's. But it feels weird because I was actually, because I'm deaf in my left ear as a result of it. I had 2 brain surgery operations to correct a long-standing physical problem which I had called superior semicircular canal dehiscence syndrome. Long story, I won't go into it here because it'll take all day. But what happened was, during this medical procedure today, my hearing suddenly got really muffled, and when I left the hospital, my mum phoned me to check if I was okay. And I have these headphones, okay, that I wear all the time because I'm just so in love with music. I just mainline music constantly. But they're Bluetooth, but I forget to switch them off. And so whenever my mum rings me, basically the headphones are on. So when she rings, she just gets this barrage of noise down the line. But when she rang me today, having come out of the hospital, I forgot that the headphones were still on. So when I answered the phone, I couldn't hear her. And I thought, oh no, now I'm deaf in both ears. So I can't. I was like, Mom, I can't hear a word you're saying. And you can imagine the kind of panic that would ensue. And I didn't realize the bonehead that I am, that it was just the case that I hadn't switched my headphones off. So so I kind of averted that near total catastrophe of 100% deafness. I still have the 50% deafness. We can roll with that.
Oh, well, you need to. It sounds like you've had a traumatic day, and you need to look forward to a really good long strawberry milkshake this evening.
Oh, very much. That's.
I think that's what you deserve. Now, I can see in the background lots of albums. Now, I'm quite good at eyesight-wise. I believe I can see a row of Kate Bush going down, and across the top there's Genesis.
Absolutely.
There you go. My encyclopedic knowledge of music. So, are these yours? Are you? Is this part of your collection?
Absolutely. I live in a music museum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, basically, when I moved here 13 years ago, see, I've been moving my whole life. I lived a very nomadic existence, constantly having to move. And when I moved here 13 years ago, I was like, wow, finally, I felt I could kind of, shape it as a home. And I set about trying to create the kind of perfect living space, or one that I felt, I could really enjoy living in. So over the course of it took a decade to actually kind of build, painstakingly built 40 separate murals,
wow,
encompassing the artworks of 40 of my favorite bands, and so between here and the kitchen, it's just like this musical labyrinth. So there's I wish I could show you the whole thing, because what you can see from here is only a very, very small portion of it. I would be tempted. I have done this before in other interviews where I've kind of moved the camera around, but inevitably, when I return, I put the phone up and it collapses, or there's some catastrophe. Because my Faulty Towers-esque, Spinal Tap-esque, moments, I want to try and minimize them as much as I can.
So just give us a fleeting overview of who's involved in those murals then.
Okay, right. Well, we've got there's an entire wall devoted to the Stone Roses. There's an entire wall devoted to the Smiths. Then there's the Beatles wall. There's Pink Floyd, The Cure, Echo and the Bunnymen, The Byrds, Blondie, Oasis, Genesis, Super Free Animals, Kate Bush, King Crimson, Suede, Embrace, Joy Division, New Order, Blur, Saint Etienne, the Charlatans, and then in the kitchen you've got Talking Heads, Roxy Music, Depeche Mode, The Pretenders, Ride, Manic Street Preachers, XTC, The Jam, ABBA, Morrissey, and more.
And so I don't need to ask you really who your influences are, because clearly it's everybody. Yeah,
it's all of those bands and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that you mentioned right towards the beginning there the Stone Roses, because that gives me a chance to do a shameless plug. If you're listening, folks, I have just tweeted in the last day or so about an event that I do once a month, but this month it's a network event. It's on Remo, and everyone can come, right? And this month I have as our guest speaker Aziz Ibrahim, who actually played with the Stone Roses.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. That is amazing. So, wow, he played with the Roses at Reading Festival 1996.
Correct. So if you'd like to meet Aziz, do come along to the event. I've been very happy to have you there, along with anybody else that's listening. We can get 200 people in this virtual room around these little virtual tables, and it'll all be lovely. We're going to be talking about how music supports mental health, etc., which is going to be a great topic. He's going to cover that, and he's going to talk about his music supporting heritage project as well. So that would be great.
That's amazing. That's really, because I know he also played with the Roses in '96 at a festival in Portugal called Via something in some Portuguese kind of words, and then he played in Spain at a festival with the Roses, and then I know he went on and played guitar with Neil Brown in his solo career. He played on Unfinished Monkey Business, and
absolutely.
I think he was also at one stage he played with Asia, and he played with, I think, Simply Red. He's an amazing guitar player. Absolutely
correct. And he also played. Let's keep the prog music thing going there, because you've got Genesis up there. He also played with the H band, which is Steve Hogarth from Marillion. So there you go.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating. So when is that going out? I would love to actually,
That's on the 23rd of June. Thanks for asking, because that's really good, and I can plug it. It's on the 23rd of June, 3:45 to 5:45. It's in Remo, which, as I say, is a platform where, if you think like Zoom, but Zoom is crap. Sorry, said it. It's like that, but basically you have these little tables in a room, and you can sit around little tables with people. Here, come to the stage, we'll have a bit from him, and then here talk to people around small tables as well, so you can have a proper chat with him. That'd be nice.
Sounds fantastic.
So yeah, looking forward to that one, and it's free. So do come along. Sponsors have paid for everyone to come. So nice. So when did music start with you then? I mean, you've obviously got this, I'm not going to call it an obsession with music, but it might be. Certainly I'm the same way myself, and my wife would say that I'm obsessed. So when did it start for you?
Right. Well, I think the very first instance of me falling in love with music, and it was pretty much an instant love affair, was when I heard the Pet Shop Boys. That was the very first. I heard West End Girls by the Pet Shop Boys. I was my first kind of my year zero, sonically speaking. I heard that record, and as a child, even though I was completely oblivious to the very adult world that it referred to, I just knew enough instinctively from the way that Neil Tennant intoned those lyrics, in that fascinatingly kind of narrative way that he did. It was almost like a narrator rather than a singer, and it was like he was beckoning you into this kind of an underworld, essentially, dive bar in town, and he set the scene so brilliantly, so descriptively. And then Chris, I was going to say,
because you're talking about West End Girls, which was their main first single, and yeah, I mean, to start a song with "Sometimes You're Better Off Dead," I mean, it's really, it's a pop song, right? But that's a really dark lyric, actually, if you think about it as a first lyric.
That's a great point. That's actually, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that is such an important point to make in relation to pop music. Pop music doesn't have to be sanitized. It doesn't have to be bland or safe, or I mean, there you've got the Pet Shop Boys with what was their debut single. I know that they ended up re-releasing it because it wasn't a hit initially, and then they ended up kind of releasing it, and they did opportunities, let's make lots of money and stuff. And then they, like a lot of bands, it took a few bites of the cherry before they actually, got sufficient support from radio in order to kind of reach people and kind of find their audience. But for them, as one of the most successful singles artists in UK pop history, and they also broke America as well, which a lot of people kind of don't remember now. But West End Girls was a #1 single in the US as well, which is an incredibly difficult thing to achieve for anyone, let alone an emerging synth pop duo that didn't play live. They in so many ways they broke the mold, and for a hit single, a #1 hit single, a debut single, one that was on a major label. I think they were signed to Parlophone. To start that song with "Sometimes You're Better Off Dead," I mean, it's such a statement of intent. It's like, we're going to do it. We're going to say what we're going to say, and regardless of how the media or radio programmers are going to kind of perceive it. And I think there needs to be more of that. Bands that take, and certainly without blowing my own trumpet, it's something that I've strived to do in my own way. And for example, like my debut single, "Last Words," which is lyrically an incredibly odd song, and for this reason I was really uncertain as to whether it would gain airplay, because radio, by its nature, can be quite conservative, and there's so much competition ongoing with artists trying to kind of compete to kind of get on the airwaves. But I just think if it is the most important thing to have your vision emerge and it not be filtered or neutered or amended or compromised in any way, and that people hear the purity of what you're trying to say or how you're trying to say it, regardless of whether it's successful immediately or whether it takes time to actually cross over or whatever it is. But I think, like Last Words, it name checks Stranraer, it name checks Larne. These are places that are not featured in the lexicon of pop music. Ordinarily you get bands, if they are going to refer to, and songwriters very often try and avoid referring to specific place names because they're often quite concerned that they'd be narrowing their scope or limiting things. But if you look, for example, the Smiths, and I know this wasn't a single, but one of my absolute all-time favorite lyrics is in "Is It Really So Strange?"
Yeah.
Where Morris in the line, "I lost my bag in Newport Pagnell." That's it for me. That alone, that lyric, if all he'd ever done was write that line, I would have been.
Well, and of course, elsewhere on this EP, you actually name check Maida Vale as well, don't you?
Right, that is right. I'm so glad that you picked up on that, and thank you for that. Yeah, the place names are, I think, incredibly evocative. And one of the things about the way that I write songs that is really important to me is a lot. Obviously, I'm trying to write from a very specific perspective in relation to the life story of Inga Mariahauser and all of the places where she visited and that are kind of woven into a tapestry, essentially, of her movements and are kind of all bound up in her life during the last week of her life, that culminated in her heinous murder. But prior to that,
I was just going to say, for people that don't know who she is, do you just want to explain who she is? And because you do a blog about her, don't you?
I do, and thank you for actually reminding me that because I'm so wrapped up in Inga and have been for the last 5 or 7 years. I sometimes need to remind myself that not everyone knows who Inga Mariahauser is. Inga Mariahauser was a German student, artist, musician, and tourist who was murdered in Northern Ireland in a notorious landmark case, the only case of its kind, the only instance of a sexually motivated murder of a tourist in Northern Ireland ever. It had been the only case of its kind back in 1988, which is what made it extremely unusual and distinctive. And the fact is, 33 years on, it's still the only case of its kind, which is astonishing. And she was a beautiful person, full of life, full of zest, and full of wonder and enthusiasm for exploring the world. And she was the only one of her classmates who sought to travel during her midterm break. She was in the second last year of her schooling in grammar school in Munich, and she had never been away from home on her own before, or rather without her parents. So she sought permission from her parents to go visit a friend of hers in Wales, and basically her friend was unable to, Inga had kind of booked the trip and bought her Interrail pass, and just before she left Munich to go visit her friend informed her that she wouldn't be able to meet at the arranged time, the arranged day, because she was on a school trip herself. So Inga decided to go ahead with the trip as it was and fill in the week that was now free with a sightseeing tour, and basically travel through England, up into Scotland, over to Northern Ireland, down to the Republic of Ireland, and then across to Wales. And then she had to be back in school in Munich. So that was her plan. And what happened was, on the night that she arrived in the UK on the she'd left her native Germany on the 29th of March 1988, arriving in the UK at Harwich on the 31st of March 1988. She spent a few days in London sightseeing. She went to Cambridge. She went to Oxford, Bath, made her way. And it's incredibly evocative when you think of the spring of 1988. and Inga traveling. She was a girl on her own with a backpack, living on her wits, and just in love with life, and incredibly excited about. She loved England and the English people. She loved Scotland, and she was most excited about visiting the island of Ireland. And on the night that she arrived, having stepped off the ferry, it's believed that she accepted a lift, and she had intended to travel to Dublin. She was planning to travel to Dublin going through Belfast, but instead she was driven in the opposite direction to an area of to the northernmost tip of County Antrim, where she was murdered, and her body was found among the trees 2 weeks later in a forest called Ballypatrick Forest. And her murder has been unsolved ever since. It's an incredibly murky, complex, harrowing, heartrending case. And I've spent the last 5 years of my life blogging, writing, campaigning on Inga's behalf, and just trying to, I suppose, increase the public's awareness of who Inga was, why her unsolved case is so important, and just to try and maintain a space for her in the online world, which she never got to be a part of. And over the course of reading about this person and writing about her and becoming fascinated by her and so moved by the circumstances at the heart of her story, I just fell in love with her, on an emotional. And as a songwriter, it's probably an inevitable thing that when one subject, one person is so kind of predominant in your thoughts, that you would just, decide to write about them. And for the last 5 years, I haven't written a song about anyone else or anything else. It's just something that I regard as being what I want to do. It's the most important thing I've ever, come across in my life. So I just thought, well, why would I write about another subject if I can try and giving a voice, in this way, because she was a musician herself and she loved music. I thought, well, that'd be something, nice that I can try and do and try and contribute, rather than just writing about myself in that kind of self-absorbed way that a lot of other songwriters are just preoccupied with writing about their own feelings and their own whatever. So yeah, that's the musical side of things, but there's the investigative aspect as well, which you'll find in my blog, the Keeley Chronicles, which is online at thekeeleychronicles.wordpress.com. But if you put Inga's name into the search engine, you'll just get to it pretty much. It's one of the first entries under her name.
It's. I mean, you just taking us through that story now is really, you can see how emotive it is and why it struck you so much in the first place. Do you feel it's because predominantly she loved music and she was a musician? Is that one of the main reasons you feel that you got such a connection with the story right from the beginning? Or
it's so people have asked me this question, and it's the question that I'm asked most frequently, and one of the two questions that I'm asked most frequently. And to this day, I'm not quite sure why she and her untold story gripped me in such a way, because I had been, I'd been reading true crime ever since I was a child. Alongside music, it was the only other interest that I've ever really had in life other than music. And I've read about countless, cases and murder victims over the years. And when you read at length about any murder victim, their story stays with you maybe for a few days, a few weeks, or it lingers in your memory. But Inga's story there's something about her and something about the circumstances of what happened to her and how it happened and where it happened and when it happened, that just makes it unique and her unique, and it just, I suppose, made it uniquely compelling to me. I don't quite know why. I have my own theories in some ways as to why it was something that was very emotionally driven. It wasn't something that I decided I'm going to focus on this. It was just, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I couldn't stop, emotionally being immersed in it, constantly.
Well, you said going back to the Pet Shop Boys, you said that that was the first music that really resonated, and it has a strong narrative. I mean, this has an incredibly strong narrative, if you like, and an unfinished narrative as well. So maybe it's just that, to a certain extent, that you're attracted to the narrative, and the fact that the narrative has not been completed and the narrative hasn't been written fully, and there's work to be done in unraveling that narrative.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think that's probably a factor, and I think the fact that I just found it's the saddest and scariest story I've ever heard of, and I've been reading since I was 10 years old. I mean, for somebody, I mean, there are other, there are cases in the Republic of Ireland where I am, whereby, foreign tourists came here. Like, for example, there's the tragic case of Manuela Rieda, who was here for, I think, 1 week on a school trip from Switzerland, and she was murdered in County Galway. And then the case of Bettina Poschel, who I think was here for about a month. She was murdered in New Grange. And then there's obviously the case of Annie McCarrick, a very famous case of an American tourist who was living in Ireland for a year and a half. And when she was her body's never found, but it is, the police believe that she was murdered. But in Inga's case, I suppose the fact that it was her dream to travel to Ireland and to experience life on the island of Ireland. And she didn't even get to spend one day here, one night. And the fact that she arrived, full of excitement and with her backpack on her shoulders, and, to have been found, left the way she was with her neck broken, an 18-year-old girl on her own. And the thing is, I think people in Northern Ireland and in Scotland are kind of famed for the welcome that they afford to visitors. There's a really just a special tendency, and something that I experienced very much when I went to Scotland, that I suppose there's people and there's kind of places that are kind of renowned for the warmth of the welcome that they afford people that are visiting from overseas. And I think it's just so upsetting to the people that are really concerned about what happened. And there are so many people around the world. That's one of the things that totally amazed me. When I published part one of my blog, I had no idea that anyone was going to be interested. I was really passionate about it, but I mentioned her name to people in Dublin, and people hadn't heard of her, because it's a very, very big deal in Northern Ireland. And I did not know this when I started working on her case, but it went viral. The Keeley Chronicles went viral on the first day that I published part one, which is very strange. When you haven't ever experienced something go viral and you don't in any way expect for something to go viral, it's a weird experience when it does, because you're totally unprepared. And then, you get an ensuing avalanche of correspondence that you then have to try and, work your way through. And it's all kind of coming at you at 100 miles an hour. So that was kind of a baptism of fire. But just the way, I suppose that I found as well that the poignancy of the sense of loss and the passage of time. And I've always found that period of time, the late 80s, really evocative. And, the kind of first music that I ever loved, the Pet Shop Boys and Smiths, they were my kind of two things. I didn't hear them quite then, but they were music of that era. And it very much kind of puts me in the mindset or the landscape of the mind of that period of time. And it's like, to me, it's like Inga is like a doorway to another world, because she was there. She was in that week. She was, however abruptly and violently and horrendously she was taken out of the world, for that last week of her life. It was the best week of her life. And she was living like you know, what's that the phrase, you know, what burns briefest burns brightest. There's that sense of like a candle being extinguished, and a sort of a there's a beautiful a sort of an impermanence or a brevity to how special, you know, something or someone sometimes is. You know, it's that thing that, you know, people often say, you know, only the good die young, or but I think there is sometimes something whereby somebody is taken out of the world so prematurely, but they manage to emit a certain kind of glow while they're alive. And I suppose Inga is that, you know, for me it's like, how remarkable is it that somebody who never even got to live their adult life and never even got to meet anyone on the island of Ireland, with the exception of her killers, but that 33 years on, despite the fact that they've been absent all that time from the world, that they're still present and that they're still capable of having enough of an impact to still be part of a conversation like we're having now, or still be, you know, inspiring enough that they would inspire like an entire album of songs and body of work about them, and people that have kind of, you know, felt inspired by Inga as well. I think it's a really beautiful thing. It's kind of testament to her her radiance as a human being, and her charisma.
And I can understand why, when you say, you know, when you mention things like the Smiths, you know, and Newport Pagnell. I don't know whether you've ever been to Newport Pagnell. I have loads of times, but it's nothing to write home about. But you know, the centering around real places, not kind of utopian places or the obvious places that everybody dreams about. You know, talking about like the Big Apple or you know, places like that, which are not, you know, a lot of people may never ever see. These are real places with a real history and are really part of a real story. You know, I can understand how important that is for you to name check those places. And I bet you're the kind of person, when you sit on a bus and you go through a particular place, if it has a resonance to you, you kind of feel that resonance with that place and the kind of the history of that place and what it means to you as well. And I think that's a truly wonderful thing to do as an artist. But also, what's really interesting with that as well is that, you know, it's okay if people listening to that as well and listening to you read, you know, telling bits of that story in a pop format, if you like, in a song, if it's a safe way of listening to what is a horrendous story as well. But it also doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, like it didn't make sense to you with the Pet Shop Boys all those years ago. I mean, you wouldn't have known what it's like to, you know, have a gun in your hand, or you know, it wouldn't matter. But it's the fact that it introduces to you a side of humanity or a side of something going on that makes you start to question. And that's the only thing that really matters, isn't it? It starts taking you on that journey. And for you, in a way, I do wonder whether, you know, as I say, that Pet Shop Boys thing was just the start of your journey into thinking, hello dog, whether it was the start of you thinking, you know, thinking about these narrations and how life travels, you know, and you've continued that journey of thinking like that.
Thank you. I think that's I think it's very true, because I think there's a thread in the songwriting of Tenant Law, of the Pet Shop Boys, and specifically of West End Girls, that I can identify in my own songwriting. And it's, even though it wasn't something that I consciously did, but I think I was drawn to West End girls in the same way that I was drawn to write the songs that I write in the way that I write them. And those places, those, like, one of the things, Crime Watch UK was always my favorite TV show, and one of the reasons was because they would name check these places, these obscure locations, whether it's like Kettering town or places like Oldham, or just these kind of places where maybe I hadn't gotten to visit, but I just found really interesting. I felt I could connect with them in a way more than I always felt like Hollywood was too glamorous and too kind of alien for me. Like I'm an Irish indie kid growing up in Dublin, and for some reason I always looked more to the UK culturally rather than to the US. Like all my favorite music is always from English, Scottish, Welsh bands and Irish bands. There's that thing, and I think with singing about those places, like one thing that actually I was at a rehearsal with my bandmates the last couple of nights, and at one point, and this is really interesting because I'd never learned this before. That's one of the really interesting things about bands, is that bands are very intense and you're creating music together, but you often are in your own headspace, and there's a collective headspace, but there's also your individual headspace within that collective headspace. And I found that the other night what they're thinking of when we're rehearsing, and they kind of what I'm thinking of, and we're thinking of completely different things. Like, they being musicians, they approach things purely from a musical perspective, which makes total sense. The fact that I'm a musician and a songwriter, and I'm a blogger and an author in relation to Inga, I have a very different map in my mind when I'm singing those songs, even in rehearsals. And it's like I'm singing the word, seeing Inga in those places, doing those things. And my bandmates aren't thinking in those terms because they're not singing those words. They're just concentrating on their own parts. They've told me that they often thinking in terms of, oh God, I have to play this part next, or
Yeah.
they're kind of more concerned, I suppose, with the logistics of
The logistics of it. It's quite interesting. I was talking to one of my other guests about this a few weeks ago, and I said, from 14 onwards, I was a singer in a band, and the last band that I was in, I didn't sing. I gave the singing bit and the lyrics and everything else over to somebody else, and I just wrote and the music and played. Sorry, the family just arrived home. And I gave that over to somebody else, and suddenly when you're a singer in a band, and especially when you write the lyrics and it's yours, etc. When you're doing that, if you're good, you're not just singing a song, you're actually in the song. You're actually reliving what that is, so that comes across to the audience. And actually you do feel the audience, because you understand that you understand that you are storytelling to the audience, and that you want them to understand what it is that you're trying to get over. But your whole world is encapsulated in that. As soon as you step away from that and you're at the back with a guitar and whatever, it's like, and this bit comes next, and then I'm doing this, and then now are they going to cut in and do this bit? And it's suddenly it's just logistics, And
I love that you as a singer, that you have a perspective on that, that a lot of people wouldn't have, a lot of musicians wouldn't even have, because they haven't approached it from the lyrical narrative kind of perspective.
It's for me it's and it's why I always tended to sing with my eyes shut, because I just wanted to go into my own little world, and I knew the audience were there, and you could feel that there's an audience in front of you absorbing what you're doing, but you are in the song and you're in the story of the song, and it's not a musical thing per se. It's you, that song coming out, and it's hard to describe it fully, isn't it? But I mean, unless you've been there, that's what you see. And I love performers where you can see, or I love musicians and singers in particular, where you can see that they just go into the song. That's, for me, it's the most gratifying thing if I go to see someone live. I don't want to see someone just singing to me. This is where, sorry to say, things like The Voice and, X Factor and are just awful, right? Yet those people are great singers. Some of them are fantastic technical singers. But, it's a performance of a song, right? As opposed to, someone actually living that song. And for me, I mentioned earlier, Marillion and Steve Hogarth. Steve Hogarth is if you ever watch him live, and do it after this.
I will.
If you ever watch Steve Hogarth singing live, you can see that he just immerses himself in the song. His body is convulsing with the song. Christian Hirsch is another one that I've been to see her, and you can see she is just in the song. For me, it's the difference between real and not real.
I completely agree, and I love that. And being in the song, that's why I play music. It's to lose myself in the song and in the sound. That's the reason. And I'm trying to get, like, the one gig that Keeley as a band actually got to play prior to the pandemic. We played our first gig 3 days before we went into lockdown here in the Republic of Ireland. And it was a magical experience. It was an otherworldly experience, because it was the first time that I got to play an entire set of songs all about Inga. And the combination of our live sound, which is very atmospheric and very immersive and very dreamlike, combined with the light show, which is quite trippy and just like, I have a thing about neon lights anyway. I just love blue or green neon lights. Just, I get completely totally entranced, to quote Inga. But being in the song and being in the sound was amazing, and especially because reliving or kind of experiencing from a at an angle all of the moments in those songs. Speaking of the moments of Inga's childhood, her adolescence, and her trip through the UK, I was completely, for that, however long we were on stage, was it 40 minutes? I was just in another world. And it's a beautiful, it's the reason why I make music, to try and get to that place. And my hope and my kind of objective, or my aspiration, is to try and take people to that place with me and with us when we play live, and when people come to see us live, for them in their own ways to be in that place, to be in that space, whether they've read extensively about Inga's story or not, whether they've read the Chronicles or not. Obviously, if you read the Chronicles, it gives you, I suppose, much more of an overview, much more of an understanding of what the songs are about and how it all relates to the overall story. But you could definitely experience it without having that knowledge, and get kind of carried away, or get kind of have that dreamlike daze, that dazed dreamlike quality, because musically, I have a guitar sound that took me years actually to get this. You'll know this from being a musician. When you have a sound in your head and you're trying to capture that sound, and I finally captured it. I was like, here we go. So whenever we play live, and hopefully we can start playing live soon, there'll be news on that front in the days to come.
Just make sure Bristol's on the list, isn't it? Bristol. Okay.
Are you based in Bristol?
I'm south of Bristol. Anywhere between Exeter and Bristol's fine.
Wow, that's really interesting, because there was actually a TV company, a TV production company, one of many that are really interested in going to have a documentary film made about Inga's case. But I was actually in Bristol just before, about 18 months ago, and Bristol is relevant to Inga's case because it's one of her stop-offs. If you read the Keeley Chronicles from parts 21 to part 34, it concerned my retracing Inga's steps, which I did, for a period of 4 days, traveling throughout England and Scotland and Northern Ireland, and then I completed part of the leg of the journey that Inga never got to, in terms of traveling from Larne to Belfast to Dublin. Although I had a bizarre experience in Larne, which if you read part 33 and part 34 of the Chronicles, you'll see exactly how bizarre that experience was. It would be too long for me to go into that. Check it out. But Bristol, Temple Meads, is one of the stop-off points that Inga made, and that I made in retracing her steps, because in going from Bath to, I'm trying to get from Bath to Preston.
You have to change line.
It's right at Bristol Temple Meads, and it is a huge train station. It is. I didn't realize just how vast it is. A really enormous train station, but I love that it just happens that you just happen to live in one of the locations that has a tangible, that there's a tangential relevance to Inga's case and to her story.
There you go. So you have a 4-track EP out.
That's right. Warrior.
And then is there more to come?
Oh, absolutely. There's more to come. The 4-track EP, Brave Warrior, is my very first release on Dimple Discs, the London-based indie label that I recently signed to, which also has The Undertones and Cathal Coughlan and a number of other really excellent artists on, and that's out on the 18th of June. But it's available for pre-order now from Bandcamp, and if you follow me on my socials, you'll see the link and check it out. And then it'll be coming out in physical form. There'll be a physical release later in the year, and then next year there'll be another EP, and then there's an album on the way. So yeah, lots to come from the Keeley camp.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I'm going to go and read some Chronicles.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm going to go to Marillion, because I do know them a little bit from having heard their wonderful version of XTC's Census Working Overtime. And I also loved the song Keeley.
Who hasn't heard of that? But the album you should probably listen to is Brave.
Okay, Brave Warrior. I love it.
Well, absolutely, and it's actually about a story that Steve Hogarth heard about a girl that went missing on a bridge.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I would definitely check them out.
There was just two. Or who turned up? Sorry, she turned up on the bridge, and she'd gone missing. And anyway, just listen to it because it's your kind of thing. There you go.
Thank you. I will.
I share every day. But thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. And this will also be available. You'll know that already if you're listening to it on Spotify as an audio version of this, complete with dogs barking in the background, because we like to keep things real here. But for now, thank you so much for joining me, Keeley. And do support Keeley by going to Bandcamp and pre-ordering the EP, because that, music isn't free. You have to pay for it. There you go. So until next time, and there will be a next time, bye for now.